Hello all, it's James Johnson, aka Sulphur Blade, and I'm here because I want to talk about this interview that I saw where some Utah college students were interviewed about, well, who they're going to vote for and why. And I think this interview was a fairly decent microcosm of what's going on in the United States, and there's things I want to touch on coming out of this interview. So let's point some of these things out, shall we?
Guide their vote with 4 weeks to go. Overall, how does COVID weigh on your vote and how you might vote? Do you think the president's handled it well? Do you think Joe Biden would handle it better?
I watched the debate last week, and I felt like Joe Biden did blame President Trump for it a little much. However, that being said, I do think that there are a lot of things he could have handled better. He knew about it pretty early on, and I think in hopes to not shut down the economy, might have not taken action that would have been beneficial to do early on.
Alright, so there's a lot to unpack from that statement. But what we can clearly see is mainstream media has certainly had an effect on this young lady's answer. And as we watch the rest of this video, we're going to notice that this particular young lady of the group is the most likely the moderate, disengaged voter. So she's the swing voter of the group. She's the person whose opinion could be swayed one direction or another. She's not ideologically bedrocked into a certain path. However, she certainly is not educated about what she has just said. So let's remind people that what she just said, we'll listen to it one more time.
I watched the debate last week, and I felt like Joe Biden did blame President Trump for it a little much. However, that being...
So I could see where some moderate type voters could feel that Joe Biden came off a bit strong, trying to blame everything with coronavirus on President Trump. That would be a logical assessment from a moderate voter's point of view. However, this next section is the part where she's strongly mistaken.
Being said, I do think that there are a lot of things he could have handled better. He knew about it pretty early on, and I think in hopes to...
So she said there's a lot of things he could have done better. But the part that she challenges is the part that Donald Trump has arguably been the most effective at. And that's shutting down travel to and from infected areas immediately. But she claims he could have done it sooner.
To not shut down the economy, might have not taken action that would have been beneficial to do early on, which has endangered a lot of Americans' lives.
And that's just a flat lie. And where would she have gotten that concept of a lie from? From mainstream media. Mainstream media is the only way she would have come up with that very wrongly misleading statement. Let's look at the truth about... Sorry. Let's look at the truth in regards to the timeline. So I've got two different timeline articles here. So the first timeline article is kind of a very narrow, let's look at it as the China viewpoint, shall we? So Sunday, December 1st. Basically, the first case was found in China, December 1st. December 12th, health officials start investigating a cluster of patients with a viral pneumonia, yada yada, inside of China. So still, at this point, through the 1st to 12th of December, this is very much a very locally contained issue in a particular city in China. It has no worldwide implications yet. Monday, 30 December, a 34-year-old ophthalmologist from Wuhan posted a message on WeChat group alerting fellow doctors to a new disease at his hospital in the late December. He writes that 7 patients have symptoms similar to SARS and are in quarantine. Lee asked his friend to inform their families and advise his colleagues to wear protective equipment. So now we're starting to have a light being shined on the fact that there's something going wrong in Wuhan, China. So this light is between 1 December and 30 December. 31 December, the Wuhan police announced that they are investigating 8 people for spreading rumors about a new infectious disease outbreak. So 31 December, China is trying to shut down talks about the spread of an infectious disease in Wuhan, China. 1 January, Hunan seafood wholesale market is shut down. Friday, 3 January, while examining somebody is summoned to a local public security office in Wuhan for spreading false rumors. So still, China is trying to shut down the false rumor narrative that there is an epidemic in Wuhan, and they're trying to nip that in the bud. That is their first reaction, to shut down the quote-unquote conspiracy about there being an outbreak. So we see that between 1 January and 3 January. In 5 January, the WHO issues an alert. Oh, well, I guess they didn't successfully hide this virus. The WHO has caught on to it, and it issues an alert that 44 patients with pneumonia of unknown etiology has been reported by the national authority in China. Of the 44 cases reported, 11 are severely ill, while the remaining 33 patients are in stable condition. Okay, so some sort of local quarantine situation is going on in China as of 5 January. The WHO seems to be aware of the situation. The world doesn't have any reason to panic at this point in time, a logical person would think. Okay, 7 January, Chinese officials announced that they have identified a new coronavirus from patients in Wuhan. Coronaviruses are a group of viruses that cause disease in mammals, blah, 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 blah. So the fact that they've found a new corona-type virus in and of itself is not something to get worried about. You know, coronaviruses are something that humanity has dealt with for some period of time. And unless it's, running rampant across the face of the planet, it's not really a big deal at this point. So Chinese officials have announced that they've identified a new coronavirus. Still, no reason for anyone in the free world to be panicking as of Tuesday, 7 January. Friday, 10 January, gene sequencing data of the new virus was posted on virological.org by researchers from Fudan University, Shanghai. A further 3 sequences were posted by the Global Initiative on Sharing All Influenza Data. On 10 January 2020, Li Wenling, coronavirus whistleblower, started having symptoms of dry cough. 2 days later, Wenling started having a fever and was admitted to the hospital on 14 January 2020. His parents also contracted the coronavirus and were admitted to the hospital with him. Wen Liang tested negative several times until finally testing positive for the coronavirus on 30 January 2020. So, he goes into the hospital, and supposedly he doesn't test positive according to Chinese sources. He doesn't. This person who is trying to blow the whistle on the fact that the coronavirus thing is happening and we've got a problem on our hands doesn't actually officially test positive for having the coronavirus until 30 January. This is important to note because at that point in time, that's 10 January that he goes into the hospital having the coronavirus but it's not officially stated that he does actually have the coronavirus until 20 days later. All right, Sunday, 12 January, using the genetic sequence of the new coronavirus made available to the WHO laboratories in different countries, start to produce diagnostic PCR tests. So now the WHO is beginning to create testing for this new novel coronavirus on 12 January. Monday, 13 January, Thailand reports the first cases outside of China. All right, now we're starting to have a problem. There's cases being reported outside of January, or outside of China, come 13 January. 13 January is a date that one should mark as being, oh, well, we have a situation. We have a virus that started in China, has now been found outside of January as of 13 January. So we're going to hold on to this date, right? Tuesday, 14 January. The WHO tweeted that preliminary investigations conducted by the Chinese authority have found no evidence of human-to-human transmission of the novel coronavirus identified in Wuhan, China. On the same day, WHO's Maria van Kerkhove said that there had been limited human-to-human transmission of coronavirus, mainly small clusters in families, adding that it is very clear right now that we have no sustained human-to-human transmission. So, going back to the day before, we now have cases outside of China. The very next day, the World Health Organization says, hold on. Stop the presses. Nothing to fear here. There's nothing that shows that this virus is transmitted through human-to-human contact. There's very limited human-to-human transmission, they say. So just, hold the presses. Don't get your undies in an uproar. That's the World Health Organization as of Tuesday, 14 January. Saturday, 18 January, the medical literature guide Amadeo draws the attention of 50,000 subscribers to a study from Imperial College London estimating the potential total number of new coronavirus cases in Wuhan City, China by Ime et al. The author estimates that a total of 1,723 cases of the novel coronavirus are in Wuhan City. So, Saturday, 18 January, basically a source in Western civilization in England is saying, hey, there's a serious problem in Wuhan, China. There's 1,723 cases of this new virus over there in Wuhan, China. That's as of 18 January that the Western society, us in the United States, Australia, England, France, Europe, you name it, finally have some sort of real, oh shit, there's a problem. 18 January is the date where you can officially mark down on the calendar, oh shit, there's a problem. Now, let's go to the other timeline. Trump's timeline of how he dealt with this thing. December 31st, reports emerge that China is investigating illness. So this is when we start to hear words about it through the media that China's having some sort of issue. They've been having an issue for a month at this point, but we're only starting to get, bits and pieces of it now. Then January 6th, through the 8th, the CDC issues a series of warnings alerting Americans not to travel to China. As of January 6th through the 8th, Trump's CDC is issuing guidelines to Americans not to travel to China. January 6th. Let's go back and look at this timeline here. What does January 6th mean in this timeline? That is like well before a lot of this stuff like January 14th, the WHO tweeted, preliminary investigation conducted by Chinese authorities have found no clear evidence of human-to-human transmission. The WHO is saying that there's no clear evidence of human-to-human transmission as of Tuesday, 14 January. The first case to arrive outside of January was in 13 January, and Trump's CDC is telling Americans not to go to China in 6 through 8 January. Well before any of this was actually verified as being a serious issue. Inside of the United States, the CDC was on the ball and was advising Americans not to go there. Now let's continue on. January 16th, CDC says U.S. will screen passengers. The 16th of January, the CDC started to screen passengers coming back from China. This is before London announced that there's 17,023 cases of COVID in Wuhan City. That was just after the WHO said there's nothing to see here, no problem, but the CDC is still screening passengers. And Trump acted poorly, you say? Where are you getting this bullshit? January 21st, the first U.S. case is confirmed. January 29th, the U.S. Coronavirus Task Force is created. Yes, U.S. Coronavirus Task Force is created on January 29th. What happens on January 30th? On the advice of the IHR Emergency Committee, the WHO declares a public health emergency of international concern. So the WHO has not announced a pandemic yet. It announces the pandemic on 30 January, but Trump creates a coronavirus task force the day before. Is Trump not ahead of the ball game here? He obviously is. On January 31st, Trump blocks all travel from China. All travel, there's some exceptions there. Americans, citizens who are traveling back from China are still allowed to go through quarantine procedures to get back to the United States. So those Americans are still allowed to come home, but the rest of travel is blocked. But of course, mainstream media tried to spin that as Trump didn't actually block all travel. Blah, 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 blah. It's a bunch of bullshit. So let's look back at what our young college student has managed to say.
Debate last week, and I felt like Joe Biden did blame President Trump for it a little much. However, that being said, I do think that there are a lot of things he could have handled better. He knew about it pretty early on, and I think in hopes to not shut down the economy, might have not taken action that would have been beneficial to do early on, which has endangered a lot of Americans' lives.
And that's just a big flat lie. So if there were some actions that he could have taken, the one that she points out is obviously not accurate. So let's move on.
And so while I wouldn't blame the entire crash of the economy and COVID on President Trump, I do think that it should have been handled better.
Each state has their own governor and they've created their own response. And so the things Trump has done, like tried to shut the borders and got the PPE equipment to all these governors, he's actually been praised by Democrat governors for doing that.
With Donald Trump's...
Very accurate. That is true. All kinds of Democrats praise Donald Trump for his response to the coronavirus situation in the early goings, until politics started to decide, well, we can't let a good we can't let a good event go to waste. So politics has a way of trying to take a situation and framing a narrative around it, and that's what mainstream media and the Democrats have been doing with the coronavirus now for some time, is they've been trying to frame a political narrative around what's going on. And that's one that this particular young man has most certainly eaten the pudding. He's a walking CNN reporter. Listen to this, kid.
PE equipment to all these governors. He's actually been praised by Democrat governors for doing that.
With Donald Trump's rhetoric against masks and acting like it's not a big deal when it's a simple scientific fact is detrimental to us.
His rhetoric against masks. Where would he have gotten that idea? Gee, would it be mainstream media who has painted this picture of Donald Trump being anti-mask, when in fact Donald Trump has used masks whenever the situation has warranted? He's never said not to wear a mask. He's been relatively pro-mask up until this point. But yet this young American believes that Donald Trump is anti-mask. That's what he'll have you believe, because he's believing the mainstream narrative that he is evidently consuming.
You see Republican areas like Utah County with higher cases and less people wearing masks, when this can actually be prevented by a mask in a lot of ways. So I think Donald Trump handled this poorly because he's setting a terrible example for the American people and the citizens of the world at large of how to take measures to prevent this from happening.
I'm going to ask each one of.
Right. So let's look at the mask situation, right? He said it's the science, stupid. Donald Trump isn't following the science. Well, I took the time to highlight a particular response here in this particular spotlight on the mask situation. The group of scientists, many from Stanford and Johns Hopkins universities, took umbrage with the conclusion and said it's verifiably false on several accounts. Other parts of the country had mandated mask use, and different parts of the United States had different degrees of lockdown. While masks are almost certainly an effective public health measure for preventing and slowing the spread of the SARS-CoV-2, the claims presented in this study are dangerously misleading. It's because they're attempting to take this mask issue and frame it into a political narrative. That's the goal here, and that's one that this kid is regurgitating and spitting out like he's a CNN anchor. All right, 2019, World Health Organization's review of numerous studies testing the efficacy of face coverings to stop the transmission of influenza found no evidence that wearing a mask is effective in reducing the transmission of the virus. The organization has further discouraged individuals from using cloth masks to cover their face during the pandemic through at a time that advice had appeared to shift. But yet, Americans were still attempting to wear masks. They were still being advised it's a good idea to wear a mask. You still seen that Donald Trump would don a mask when he was not able to socially distance. You'd still see that people in the coronavirus task force would wear masks. So this narrative that Trump is anti-mask is stupidity. And then the narrative that the science says that masks will stop this thing isn't 100% scientific as these people claim. It's the science. It's the science. The scientists say. Well, there's a lot of different reports that have a lot of different opinions about masks. In fact, some of the latest studies show that cloth masks may actually be worse. However, what most people believe, and this is the true dope behind the masks, that an educated person would understand if they were actually informed and not just regurgitating a CNN line, is that there are a large group of asymptomatic individuals in the world. What is an asymptomatic individual? It's a person who's walking around with the coronavirus and has no fucking idea they have it because they have no actual symptoms. They're simply a carrier and they have no idea that they got it. And there's evidently a much larger group of those individuals in the world than what we first had thought there were. And because there's such a large group of asymptomatic individuals, if you're wearing a mask and you're asymptomatic, it's less likely that you are actually going to physically transmit the coronavirus to the other person. Even though you have no idea you have it, because you're wearing that mask, it's less likely that you're going to transmit it. That is the purpose or the recommendations behind wearing masks. And yeah, there's some okay science behind it. However, is it worth is it worth how do I put this? So when you're talking about government, and you're talking about Trump, and you're talking about governors, and you're talking about anyone in government having to make a decision based on the science, they also have to make decisions based off of other things, like, for example, the Constitution, or the economy, or the host of other issues that make up the entire pie, than just the simple narrow focus of saving lives. In a simple world, if that was the only thing that was involved was the saving of lives, well, governments would be very easy, wouldn't it? But we don't live in that type of simple world. We live in a world where people need to go to work. We live in a people where people need to pay their mortgages. We live in a world where people need to put food on the table for their kids. We live in a world where kids need to go to school to learn. You know, this is not a black and white world. This is a world with lots of shades of gray, and there's lots of pros and cons to have to weigh behind any decision. No decision is as simple as just, oh, it'll save lives. If everything was that simple, then life would be very, very, very simple. But it's not. So here we have, do we want to trample over the Constitution and mandate mask wearing? Absolutely not. You should not be trampling over the Constitution and telling your people that they have to wear a mask. It's one thing to give them the accurate science and let them make a risk factor conclusion about whether or not what they want to do going forward, right? But to force people to wear a mask is insane. It's not constitutional. And the number of lives that could be saved from everyone wearing a mask to the majority of people willingly wearing a mask without being forced to wear a mask by some draconian law is not worth implementing a law that destroys your Constitution, that sets a precedent that the Constitution is that flexible that you can just change it whenever you want to. That's not how things work in America. And no matter how much you might feel that that's the way it should work, you're wrong. And I'm sorry. So let's go ahead and continue to watch these poor misguided kids.
You know, what's the number one issue for you, Ben?
I would probably say climate change is definitely one of the most important.
I would say economy.
All right. So right there, we can see a clear contrast. The kid with the funky haircut and the knees showing through his pants says climate change. Not that I'm trying to paint him in any discouraging light, but the nicer dressed kid next to him with some very nice shoes, clean cut, very articulate, says it's the economy, stupid. So here we have a clear contrast between, you know, the stereotypical liberal-minded, oh my God, the world is ending because of climate change, AOC type thought process, right? The Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez progressive-minded kids who believe that the world's actually ending because of climate change. Now, of course, we haven't gotten on the topic of climate change in here. He's just said that's That's the topic that's most important to him. Now, we don't get any follow-up questions as to whether or not he believes that the majority of climate change has been caused by the environment or the majority of climate change has been caused by human beings. See, that's a completely different situation. And most people are not climate deniers. Most people have a much different thought process about what is a climate denier. So if you believe that Mother Nature has had the most significant effect on climate change, you're a climate denier. But yet there's very serious credible fact that Mother Nature is far and away the most number one cause to the fact that there's global warming. The fact that huge pockets of methane are being released into our atmosphere daily across Canada, Alaska, and Russia as the permafrost and tundras in those regions are thawing. And each time it happens, methane, more methane can be released underneath a particular lake in Canada up north than the entire footprint of humanity could release into the atmosphere over the course of a year. This is just how serious this stuff is happening up in the tundra. But you don't hear about the fact that giant, and we're talking just astronomical amounts of methane, are being released into the atmosphere by Mother Nature. You hear about how we need to be driving electric cars and how we need to change our energy infrastructure over to solar and wind power to save the world. But the fact is, Mother Nature is having a huge influence on what's going on in climate change as we speak. Yes, the world is warming up, and yes, it is happening at an alarming rate. And yes, it is primarily Mother Nature that's doing it. Did us as humans in the Industrial Revolution over the past 120 years have any type of effect on the situation? If we did, what the political left would have you believe is about 1,000 times more of effect than what we actually had. Because they want to They do what the left does. They paint a political picture and try to use something that everyone's going to agree with for their political purposes. Who the hell would actually fight with the fact that Mother Nature is warming at an alarming rate? That's obvious, right? If you disagree with that, you're obviously a climate denier. You're obviously a fucking idiot. And then they can, point their finger at you. You're not thinking like the hive mind. You're not thinking like the group. You're wrong, blah, 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 blah. But like with most everything in this world, it's not as simple as groupthink. It's actually much more gray than black and white. There's far more details that go into situations and issues than simply saying climate change. I'm therefore a Democrat and I'm going to vote for Joe Biden. When you think in that type of very narrow-minded thought processes, then yeah, you are who you are.
Economy, Bethany?
I'm big on foreign policy.
Foreign policy. So again, foreign policy is a kind of a moderate thought processes. So if you say it's the environment stupid, you can easily be shoehorned into the left. And if you say it's the economy stupid, you can generally easily be shoehorned into the right. But when you say something like foreign policy, it's like, whoa, what camp are you in? Foreign policy is a very let's just say that the Democrats and Republicans haven't created a very set in the clay molding of what foreign policy should be. Each party has been a little bit has changed a bit through the years on how they react to certain things. Like, for instance, the Democrats under Obama acted very much like the Republicans under George W. Bush. They had very similar foreign policy-esque approaches. If she's saying foreign policy, I'm going to think that it's probably she doesn't want to be part of stupid foreign wars. In which case, she's probably a little bit torn, because Donald Trump has been the first president who hasn't gotten us involved in new foreign wars. He has brought the troops home. So, again, she's the moderate of the group that's probably more torn than the rest of them.
I'm going to have to pick three. So I'd say rebuilding the economy given the state that it's in, climate change, and then also healthcare.
All right, yes. The big three. Well, not the big three for Democrats. The big three if you were a CNN reporter. So you got to walk the company line with the healthcare narrative, where we want government healthcare. We think it's, and the economy, that's the other, big left-wing talking point. But then he's trying to take the economy and frame it into that the Democrats are better with the economy, based off of his CNN anchor approach of things. He's a sadly very misguided individual that needs to think for himself. I would challenge this young man, who looks very articulate. He looks very sharp, sitting there dressed in a suit with a nice haircut. I would challenge him to go read some books, read some research, and come up with his own conclusions rather than listening to CNN.
Okay, Sophia.
The economy.
Yeah, okay. So I want to do the same thing, and I want to ask you each, if you, one word to describe President Trump.
One word to describe President Trump that I would use is irresponsible.
We got Don Lemon Jr. sitting here. I swear to God. So, if we asked CNN to describe Donald Trump, what would they say? Irresponsible, right?
Reactionary.
All right. So the moderate says reactionary. And, you could see where moderate individuals could come to that conclusion about Donald Trump. He can come off as reactionary. So I don't mind her comment. In fact, I think she is the person in this group that most interests me, because I think she most represents this group of Americans that are stuck in between the two warring factions. It's her group that's going to decide this election. It's her group that has to figure out the waters between these idiots on the left and these idiots on the right. Well, I'm not to say that the right is idiots, so let me rephrase that. She needs to figure out that these guys are telling the truth and that these guys are full of shit. But is she going to figure that out? So far, it's not looking so good.
Powerful.
selfish.
Selfish.
Very outgoing.
Okay. Interesting. And let's do the same thing with Joe Biden. Ben, you want to start?
Leader.
I'm sorry, I can't take it.
Very old.
Dedicated?
Dedicated, says the moderate. Well, 47 years in office, I suppose, could come off as being dedicated, or it could also come off as being corrupt. The fact that she didn't say corrupt, but she said dedicated, should be worrisome. So this is the moderate of the group who's evidently leaning to the Biden side. So Republicans have failed to actually reach her.
Slow.
Confident.
Confident. Oh boy.
Interesting. So when you look at the state of Utah, do you think, regardless of how you feel, raise your hand if you think that President Trump will win this state? Everybody. When you look at the United States right now, do you feel like it's headed in the right direction, or do you feel like it's headed in the wrong direction?
I would say that given our current state, we're backpedaling by decades, especially when it comes to civil unrest. All the progress that we've made over these years is being retracted by leaders of the Conservative Party currently.
By leaders of the Conservative Party, says this young CNN anchor, because leaders of the Conservative Party are walking around burning down businesses? No. Leaders of the Conservative Party are not Antifa and Black Lives Matter. Leaders of the Conservative Party are doing anything they can to stop the violence. Donald Trump deputized police officers in Portland to finally find a way around their corrupt DA letting people go. The cops were not able to arrest anyone over there because the DA would just catch and release, would let these criminals go back on the streets free. So Trump has now deputized a whole bunch of people in Portland, and state troopers of Oregon are deputized as federal officers so that now their cases can be seen in front of a U.S. attorney instead of in front of the Multnomah local DA who's letting everybody go free. But he would sit here and have us believe that it's the Republicans that are causing all of the problem and the violence and the hate. Again, he's been watching too much fucking CNN.
And I think with the Joe Biden election, we can get back on track and take some steps forward.
So
we can get back on track. Yes, we can keep taking huge bribes from China. Sounds like a great idea.
Support Joe Biden. Do you have any concerns about him? There have been a lot of talk about, about his abilities to do the job. Does that concern you at all?
Well, he certainly wasn't my number one choice in the primary. He wasn't even in my top 5. But
no, he wasn't. I'm sure Pete Buttigieg would have been your number one choice, or maybe Bernie Sanders. One of those two were certainly this young man's number one go-to. And I wouldn't say I would fault him for that. I could see where the appeal is for a young voter to be all about a Pete Buttigieg or a Bernie Sanders. Because it's easy as a young person to fall for the fantasy of socialism. There's a reason people like watching Star Trek, or Gene Roddenberry's version of Star Trek. It was because it gave people a very hopeful picture of what humanity could become. Unlike Picard, which was trash, but that's a whole different story. So, Star Trek was a very socialist utopian society, and socialism, while looked at through a naive young person lens, could look very appealing. But the fact of the matter is, when you try to put it into actual when you actually try to put those concepts into a government situation, you primarily always end up with Venezuela. You primarily always end up with shit going bad. Socialism is a wonderful thing to look at, and maybe taking a few socialist ideas here and there and interjecting them into a representative democracy is okay. So by and large, classical Democrats, the Democrats we used to know for the past 20 or 30 years, were all right because they tended to put in a few of these socialist policies that could help improve upon capitalism and help improve upon a representative democracy. But you can't run the entire system that way. And he likely believes you can, because he's been to too many Bernie Sanders rallies.
I think as I've gotten to know him a little bit better as a candidate, I've become more confident in him. I think he's a steady leader that we need right now.
Is it hard?
Is that because AOC told you need to vote for him? Is that because Bernie said you need to vote for him? Or is that because you've actually been paying attention to Sleepy Joe?
For you guys in college, the Trump supporters, do you find that people are comfortable with your support for the president?
In Utah in general, it's pretty conservative, but I definitely have some friends who have a hard time with my views. So.
Yeah.
I feel like, especially on college campuses, and free speech I feel like it's under attack. As a conservative group on campus, when we bring a right-wing speaker on campus, when we are even holding meetings or just simply tabling, our properties are vandalized, we're harassed, we're called names. And there's amounts of sabotage from left-wing student groups that try to get us to not hold meetings. And in that sense, it's extremely hard. I believe conservative speech is under attack in college campuses.
Do you feel like...
So, wow. All I can say is wow. How has the country changed so much in 20, 30 years? When I was that young man's age, I would have expected to have heard that exact same comment being made by a Democrat. So 30, 40 years ago, it would have been the Democrats sitting there saying, we need to respect free speech because our voices are being shut down by the conservatives and the Republicans. Now it's flip-flopped. Now it's young Republicans who are saying their voices are being stifled by the left. How have we gotten to this point? How has this happened?
Like Kwok and people who feel like him have the right to speak out and hold their meetings and say what they want to say, Ben?
Absolutely. I mean, so at Weber State University, I'm the VP of the Democrats, the college Democrats, and we also have a college Republicans chapter, and we try to work together whenever we can to do joint events, and that's something we're looking to do, because if we can't have conversations with someone with different views, then we can't make any progress at all.
Well, that's reassuring, and that's nice of you to say, but do I believe you? I mean, to be honest, young man, you haven't said anything of substance in this whole talk. Your other Democratic colleague back there, the CNN anchor, has certainly said plenty to show that he's just a walking CNN anchor. You, on the other hand, have been very quiet about where your democratic ideals come from. I can't put a picture or easily say your policies are from watching too much mainstream propaganda. You could actually be a classical Democrat, and I don't even know. You could be a sane Democrat. There's certainly, I guess, more of a chance that you are the sane Democrat of the group. but I can't say that for sure because you haven't given us anything to work with other than this lofty speech.
So I certainly can respect people with different opinions than me.
Raise your hand if you think that your friends, the people you know in college, raise your hand if you think they will all definitely vote. A few.
There's always going to be those people who maybe are in the middle ground and feel like they shouldn't vote. However, I disagree with them and think that they shouldn't vote with third party or shouldn't stay at home and they should get out.
They shouldn't vote third party. Where have we heard that before? Oh, could it be that Democrats are getting the Green Party and the Liberal Party kicked off of the ballots across all kinds of the battleground states? Why are you trying to shut down people's ability to vote? Why does it have to be a two-party system? Where are you coming up with? Well, we know where you're coming up with this concept. You're brainwashed by CNN.
To the ballots and exercise their right to vote.
Do you have concerns as a young person in America that there's a fundamental change coming, that people are leaning more to the left? Does it concern you or not?
It is very concerning. I really wish that in the vice presidential debate especially, VP Pence and Senator Harris would be able to talk about policy, and have substantive arguments, constructive arguments, so that voters can really make an informed decision. And I believe that it just sets a precedent and it sets a climate for the political atmosphere.
It's hard for me to see myself voting for like Republicans like President Trump, just because I do care about like immigration and.
Right, here's the moderate, and she's kind of laying out the reason that she's not going to vote for Trump. Immigration. So evidently she's a compassionate voter. And there's nothing wrong with being a compassionate voter. And what I mean by compassionate voter is you'll have a number of individuals who, when they're asked, if these people escaping from whatever horrible things are happening to them inside of Honduras or Guatemala or wherever are running to the U.S. for safety, should they be deported? She's the type of voter that would be like, no, they shouldn't be deported. And she wouldn't care about the precedent that would set for immigration as a whole, because it's about being the compassionate voter. And there's nothing wrong with being compassionate. That's an understandable viewpoint on topics like that. So if her number one driving factor for the election is going to be on the topic of immigration, and then it's also going to be from a compassionate viewpoint, then there really wasn't anything Republicans can do to have gotten her vote. I mean, certainly I'm sure that she's not too fond with the cities being burnt down right now. I'm certain that she's probably very torn with the fact that Trump is the person who's bringing back law and order. But her primary issue, as she's just pointed out, is being a compassionate voter in regards to immigration. And so when push comes to shove, she's going to have to side against Trump.
And several other issues. And I think many younger voters are in the same boat, where socially they might be a lot more moderate or even liberal, and would love to be able to support conservative candidates.
Raise your hand if you think that Joe Biden will win. 3.
All right, so you obviously have the two liberals raising their hand for Joe Biden, and then you have the moderate who has decided to go for Joe Biden raising her hand. The two conservatives, when they raise their hand, they're going to raise their hand kind of with a caveat that they're not sure that Trump's going to win. And that's the other point I wanted to do this video on.
3. Do you think President Trump will win? You're not so sure. Yeah.
No.
So it's definitely easy for Republicans to feel that way because we need to remember that these polls are a political tool used by the left. They've been using this same tactic for years, where they put out these polls showing that their candidate in the left is so far ahead to try to discourage conservative and Republican voters from even bothering to go out and vote, because it's a foregone conclusion that their candidate is going to lose. And we're seeing this on display right here. We're seeing the conservatives with this wishy-washy, we're not sure Trump is going to win attitude, because mainstream media and even Fox News keeps pointing out these polls that are by and largely liberal biased. And the point of these polls are a political tool to make you, the Republican voter, you, the conservative voter, question whether or not Trump's going to win. And if you're questioning it, you might not decide to go cast your vote. So what do you need to do to make sure that Trump wins come election day? You need to go cast your vote. You need to vote for him because it's imperative that you vote for him. If you can't question whether he's going to win or not. You just need to go vote. That is my advice to you. For Republicans and conservatives everywhere, is no matter what you think, even if you think Trump's not going to win, go vote anyway. You might be surprised with the result. Nobody said Trump was going to win in 2016 either, and he did. So just go cast your vote. You don't know if you're going to be the vote that makes the difference, but you very well could be. So just go vote and ignore the polls. The polls are useless. They're just there to bring you down, to make you doubt, to make you not want to vote. They are a simple tool in the left-wing quiver, as Nancy Pelosi would say, that they're using against you. So ignore the polls, go vote. I'm James Johnson, aka Sulfurblade. This is my content. Hopefully you're enjoying it. If so, please leave a like and subscribe. And until the next time, all, peace.